Happy September, 2 weeks in the women's college volleyball season in the past. Here we sit in another Six Rotations episode alongside Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman. And Mick, can every week of women's college volleyball be like that one? I mean, there are stories, and we try to rank how important some topics are from A to B to C. This week, there are D stories that would usually lead our show, and there is so much fun stuff to jump on. But, of course, it feels like a while ago, but just 6 days ago, we had the historic volleyball day in Nebraska. And, I want to give so much credit to everyone who put that together. And I want to take your input and get your opinions. And I want to start off for anyone that was maybe living on a cruise ship last week or under a rock, but 92,003 people crammed in. They drank, they ate, they partied, they watched Wayne State sweep Nebraska Kearney, and then filled it for Omaha and Nebraska. And the Huskers continue to dominate. They haven't lost a set this season. The most attended women's sporting event in the world's history. It didn't quite sink in for me watching. And then I think all of the social media clips and the John Cookisms and all of the videos really made the moment so special. And so I want to give the stage to you. Obviously, you've dedicated so much of your life to this sport, and to see this all come to a culmination, what did it mean?
Well, to a lot of people, they actually ended up crying.
Yeah.
They thought it was that good an event. To my way of thinking, it was an event, but what are the effects? What are the trickle downs that are going to happen for volleyball? Certainly, we're not going to have everybody trying to fill a football stadium with their volleyball fans. I think it was an eye-opener to television that the sport has that much appeal, at least in Nebraska, that program is making money. I think there are several others that are starting to make money also. But what it means for the sport is, I think athletic directors, other people across the country will start thinking about opening the 16 to 20,000 stadiums for volleyball, because they can fill them. And if they can fill those stadiums, and if television buys in like ABC has for the championships in Tampa, there's money to be made. Some estimates $17 billion a year in volleyball from top to bottom, not just collegiate, but every place. So if there's that kind of money out there, and this event opened eyes, then hail to Nebraska and their athletic director, and especially their athletic director, for standing up and supporting Cook on this. And other athletic directors around the country need to see this, hear this, and understand that with a little foresight, a little planning, and with a good coach who's willing to take the ball and run with it like John did, this is all possible now in our sport.
I think there will be more matches in bigger venues like football stadiums, like potentially more unique venues that we could see around this country. I'd love to see a top matchup in, let's say, an area of the country that could do it in a professional baseball stadium, for example, right? We're seeing a lot of these different hockey games and baseball stadiums and stuff like that. I think that could be really fun. I do want to get into some of the specifics, but the biggest thing to me I noticed, and being kind of tapped in with the sports friends and family that don't watch college volleyball, is that was the intent. And if that was the intent, it was a success, to just try to get people that are not interested to say, wow, a lot of people went to that match. And I think when we have the Michigan, Ohio State, or the Wisconsin, Minnesota match on Fox, that'll be another big wow. When you go from watching Green Bay play Minnesota, and then it just goes straight into women's college volleyball. Those are the impacts that we need in this sport, so that people can get more into playing fantasy in the, in the postseason, or just getting the buzz more circulating around filling out your brackets, or like getting a little bit, oh, Nebraska, I remember them. I'll watch them play the Final Four this year. Just different things like that, I think, is big.
Now, how about a volleyball fantasy league?
What'd you say?
How about a volleyball fantasy league?
I think we need to start smaller and just try to do a bracket, on ESPN, bracket challenge. But I do know people, the forums out there that do the volleyball fantasy leagues. I love it. I would be in on a volleyball fantasy league. Well, if you had Andy Jackson this week for Nebraska, she put up some great numbers, 8-2-12 in that very awkward outdoor setting, backed it up with a 10-1-12 against Kansas State. How about starting 4 freshmen for Nebraska in that match? That takes a lot of gumption from Coach Cook. And here's your trivia answer for those that weren't quite sure or didn't see it. The second most attended sporting event in the world's history in women are now last March, Barcelona versus Real Madrid. It was 91,553. So they beat it by just under 500 fans. And it just took every last nudge, every last standing room seat to get the 92,003. But Nebraska, those that are saying, well, they haven't played anyone, why didn't they schedule someone like Creighton? We're going to get Creighton against Nebraska in Devaney on Wednesday on BTN, and then Nebraska will head out to Long Beach State, the team that beat Texas to start the year. That'll be on Saturday. So we'll get to see a little bit more, and I think this is a week of exposure for some of the teams like Louisville, like BYU, that haven't quite bolstered their pre-conference schedule. This is week 3. We're going to see it come into light. But Mick, I think it's time to break down some of these matches throughout the week, brought to you as always by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. And Mick, 12 of the top 25 went down this week. 3 of the top 10 in Stanford, Minnesota, both of them swept by the Gators, and then Texas fell to Stanford in 3 as well. Let's take a look at our top 5 teams for the AVCA TerraFlex Top 25 poll. And well, there are 5 interchangeable teams to me, depending on where you want to look region-wise, if you're asking someone in the South or you're asking someone out on the West Coast or in the Midwest. And I have some Wisconsin fans hitting me up saying we don't even deserve to be number 1 after barely getting by Arkansas and Tennessee in 5 sets. But still, Nebraska last week was 4. They stay at 4. Florida bumps from 8 to 3. That shakes up our all-red top 5. But what do you think about the way that things shook out for the coaches?
Well, I disagree with the coaches. I agree the top 5 teams. I think I can say they got the top 5 teams from my standpoint. Watching all of them play this week was amazingly fun. I agree with Wisconsin. Their fans, they should not be number 1. They need to clean it up quite a bit. However, they're extremely talented. I have Stanford as number 1, and when they're 100% healthy, they're the team to beat this year. I say Wisconsin 2 right now, but I'll tell you what, your Gators, for the first time in a long time, have all the parts. They have all the parts, and they can play for the championship this year. So I have Florida at 3. I have Louisville at 4, and I came in with Pittsburgh at 5, actually.
And we're going to get some more. And like I said, the week of exposure, Louisville, they swept Missouri. They'll play Dayton on Wednesday, and then Penn State in the KFC Yum Center, a chance to really show out and bring, 10,000 plus fans into that. That'll be Sunday for Louisville. Then they'll play Kentucky and Stanford next week at home as well. But I do want to talk a bit about Wisconsin. The defense has been a bit suspect. The serve receive has been downright disgraceful. They've been aced 10 or more times in 3 matches already, including the near reverse sweep at the hands of Tennessee over the weekend. They had a away at Arkansas, and the first match was so fun. Arkansas hangs and bangs, and their fans were so fun. And Arkansas blew a big lead in the 3rd set, but finished it strong in the 4th. They were out blocking Wisconsin, I think 18-8 at one point, and Jillian with 22 kills for Arkansas, and Taylor Head was great, but Devin Robinson showed Devin Robinson, right? 40 kills in 2 matches that both went 5 sets this past weekend, and Wisconsin's block came up big at 13-all in that Arkansas match. And I'll tell you what, Logan Eggleston was on the broadcast. I don't know if you tuned into any of that to start their weekend. I thought she was phenomenal. Obviously, she came on our show and was really well-spoken and personable, and she's got a career on TV if she wants one. Mick, we can carry that right into the Florida. So I want to hear a little bit. You mentioned Wisconsin. Woo, Kennedy Martin, freshman of the week, player of the week in the AVCA last week, goes into Maples Pavilion. The atmosphere was not, the same thing as Arkansas or at Texas. We know that the new ACC team in Stanford playing in their final year in the Pac-12. We'll get to all of that change in a little bit. But Florida, they take advantage of miscues from Stanford. They blew 2 set points to the Cardinal. Florida fights back to win that second set 29-27. When Stanford hits 415 in a set and loses it, that's how you can tell that Florida's offense can hang. Kennedy Martin finishes with 11 kills in that match. They turn it around and sweep Minnesota. It was such a crowded week. There was so much that went on. What were you able to kind of see from the Gators and obviously that star setter in Alexis Stuckey?
Well, I think the Gators have a tougher time against Stanford when Baird plays. Baird did not play in that match. The freshman left side played. Not that she's not outstanding talent, but Baird makes a difference. She can score, she can block, and she's somebody they're comfortable with. I watched her against Texas on Sunday. She made a huge difference, and Stanford only made 7 hitting errors in that match, that whole match. So they played one of their finer matches. I know Florida won out there at Stanford. I know Stanford won at Texas. But I just look at the talent and look at the potential. And I have Florida second or third. I have Stanford first. I want to see Wisconsin clean it up, and then we can get to the rest of them.
Well, there's going to be a really fun weekend in Palo Alto. We've got Oregon, Minnesota, Stanford, Ohio State, all combining in a Big Ten, I guess we'll call it Pac-12 challenge for one final season. That's going to be a lot of fun. Oregon sits right on the outside looking in. Let's take a look now at the 6 through 15. Oregon lost just 1 set against San Diego State, Santa Barbara, Pepperdine. We haven't quite seen a top build matchup for Oregon, a top 5 opponent until this upcoming weekend, Friday and Saturday with Ohio State and Minnesota for the Ducks. There's a lot of a bit of conjunction and congestion here in this area. Texas sits right behind him at 7. And so Wenis makes her return to Minnesota. The first and third sets were a bit of a breeze. Minnesota's block stands tall in the second. Wooker is a really fun freshman that is going to get better and better as the matches go on, but it is certainly a punch to the face for scheduling purposes for such a young team. It was a huge service error that came at 22-22 in that fourth set, and then a big block pushed it, and Skinner, as you would expect, stood tall on match point. But Mick, I want to hear from you. What happened for Texas in the loss to Stanford?
Well, very interesting. One of the same things that happened early in one of their earlier matches. In the first set, their first contact was very good, but their second contact kept them totally out of system. The freshman setter really had trouble. The crowd was unbelievable. It was sold out. Tickets going for $160 to get into that venue. They were lined up for 2 blocks at an hour before the match to just get in. That's a lot to take for a freshman setter coming in from the Midwest. But in the second set, then Stanford started getting to Texas with the serve. So the first contact broke down a little bit. Texas used a lot of defensive specialists. They had 4 different kids out there, including Libero, who's had some rough going in the third set and a little bit in the second set. The first 2 games were really good. The third game, Texas lost their mojo. They lost their leadership. They really took a step back, and that's where they are right now. And I'm sure this is the best thing that could have happened to them, because they had to go into the locker room and talk about what happened to our leadership, who's going to step up. Wenis had a particularly bad match, but I have a feeling that she got out of system with the setting and couldn't find her rhythm. And that was a big thing for Wenis to play in that Gregory gym with that many people there, that loud. At one point, I mean, Stanford got Kevin Hambley's attention. The Texas crowd got Kevin's attention when Texas came back, had an 8-1 run or something to get back in the first set, and his hair perked up and his ears were up, and he was a bit worried. But Stanford was pretty cool. They were. I have to say the setter was absolutely phenomenal. Her choices, I think, were exceptionally good, and she will be somebody that national team is going to be after really soon.
So Stanford's got a Tuesday night match with Rice, who was ranked last week but fell to Louisiana. Louisiana's first ever top 25 win as a D1 team. Christy Gray, the head coach there, so excited about that on Tuesday. I actually had the match Saturday, Louisiana against Texas Tech, and the Red Raiders rolled there. So it was a bit of a disappointment, I think, for Rice to kind of see that so early in the week. But they certainly have a chance to get back in the top 25 if they can upset Stanford tonight, if you're watching this when we
they're going to have to work at it because Louisiana beat them. Rice didn't lose. Louisiana took it to them, the same as.
That's a team, Mick, whose their average blocking line is about 5'11".
Yeah, and the Sun Belt has added sand volleyball besides, and all of their teams are playing at a level higher than they played last year. We can talk when we get to the Houston Texas State match. We can talk about that a little bit. But I saw all those matches, and I watched every set of that Rice Louisiana match, and I was awed at the way Louisiana took it to them.
Let's keep on rolling here. In the 8th spot, BYU can quickly, still 6-0. They beat Pitt early in the year, so I guess it's okay to put them a little bit above Pittsburgh, but the Panthers are scheduling tough and playing really well. BYU hasn't played another top 50 team since, but they'll play Towson on Thursday. That's a scrappy Tigers team that usually makes the NCAA tournament.
That's not a throwaway match. That's a good match. Towson is good.
A noon Eastern time game. So, 9 a.m. for BYU fans. And then Washington State BYU on Friday is going to be really fun.
Big match.
Yeah, that's going to be really, really good for Washington State. Magna Jelarova became their all-time blocking leader with over 615. She was really a standout in the win over Drake. It was a weird match for Washington State, but they sit in the 13th spot. So that'll be a really fun one against BYU. Let's talk Pitt, because Pitt schedules a home and home with University of Kentucky, Friday and Sunday, Friday in Lexington, Sunday in Yinstown, and Vasquez Gomez, Mick. I watched about 20 minutes of this match. I was in and out of doing work and other stuff. She has one of the most lively arms in the country. Okay, so keep an eye. I think the ACC is starting to rear its head again as everyone forgets about him, with a good run by Georgia Tech over Ohio State. And then Pitt sweeps Kentucky in Lexington, wins in 4 at home, and will face Marquette on Friday.
Yeah, I think she's finally starting to play. That's really good for Pitt because she didn't have a very good first weekend. But Pitt, they come out kind of like Skinner does at Kentucky. They mess around, they try to find the right combinations, and then they start purring like a cat and start playing. Well, I had Pitt 5 because I think that's where they're going to be. And I look at how he's working them into the situation. I look at their talent. I think they're real good. I will say this about the Washington State BYU match. This is Washington State's time. If they're ever going to take a step forward and get out of this 19th to 21 spot, they need to beat BYU, and they need to beat them convincingly and move up there with their talent. They have the talent this year. They've always been close, but they seem to, in these matches, seem to fall back to a 2-3 loss. And those, I really want to encourage BYU to be ready for Washington State, because I think they need to step up this weekend.
And then Baylor in the 14th spot, they beat Rice in 4 to kind of finish up a tough week for Rice. But before we move on to the 16 through 25, I want to give a little bit of credit again to Georgia Tech, because what we're seeing with Coach Collier and what we're seeing with this entire program, to schedule tough in what feels like could have been a down year in a way. You've got, one more year of Bertolino and who else can come in. Georgia Tech's undefeated. They beat Penn State, Ohio State, as Georgia Tech took care of the Buckeyes twice this weekend. Now Pitt, I looked at the schedule. Georgia Tech, I looked at the schedule. They won't have anything crazy until they play Pitt in October. So there could be some moments of letdown in the next few weeks. but keep an eye on the freshman Larissa Mendez, another Brazilian standout for that team and that coaching staff and that culture. And Georgia Tech sitting at 11 feels a little underrated to me. I don't think they should be behind Minnesota with all the losses that have stacked up for Golden Gopher. But Keegan Cook's crew's got a chance going out to Stanford and taking on Oregon and Stanford to just get right back into the top 10.
Well, they could do that. Minnesota could do that if Landfair would step up. Landfair has just not been at the standard that we've seen her play before, and they need her to play, obviously, and lead. She's making unforced hitting errors, doing some things like that that are really not sorry.
That's all right. Let me jump in real quick. Georgia Tech doing all of this on the road as well. They've won now all 3 of those top 15 matches on the road. They came back from down 23-18 in one of the sets to beat Ohio State in 4, and then took them down on Saturday as well. You talk about Landfair, we'll learn a little bit more, but let's keep on moving. Let's look at the 16 through 25 here. And I mentioned Creighton against Nebraska's coming up. That's going to be 16 versus 4. That'll be a fun midweek matchup. But Mick, missed opportunity after missed opportunity for Arkansas and Tennessee. Tennessee had a great trip out to San Diego. They beat USD, and then they're down 2-0 in Madison. And like you said, I think they felt like they should have won that match in 5.
Yeah, I think there's this group is interchangeable, and I moved Minnesota into this group, quite honestly, because I think until they start playing, they deserve to be down a little bit farther. I think Penn State needs to be down a little bit farther with this group also. The teams, like I said, that in this group, Creighton has a chance to win this game against Nebraska. And if they do, we should reward Creighton because they have the arms and the defense that they can do this. They just have to come out and play every night. Arkansas is a gutsy team that you love to watch and play. I'm glad they've moved them up, but I think Tennessee has more talent. And if Tennessee keeps getting better, their physicalness is going to put them in a great spot in the SEC. Kentucky doesn't seem to be showing us what we thought Kentucky had, so I think they're well placed. I think Purdue is winning games, that probably they should, but at the last minute. So they have to get their people together, get their defense to really start playing the way they like to have them play and score the ball. But I worry about Penn State scoring the ball. That's where I think Penn State's in trouble. So let's watch that, see if Washington State wins against BYU. That would move BYU down, Washington State up. Watch what Penn State does. And then the team that's the biggest question for me is Ohio State. There are people in love with Ohio State. I, for one, don't know how Ohio State's going to maintain this level with freshmen playing as many as they have. But Nebraska's playing 4 freshmen. And I had somebody at a pretty high level tell me they thought Ohio State was going to make a difference when the tournament came around. I kind of wonder because, freshmen seem to run out of gas after that first month in a lot of places. So we need to watch Nebraska. We need to watch Ohio State because of the volume of freshmen. And that would get us to Houston, who I got to watch play Texas State. And Texas State literally ran Houston out of the gym. They ran at them in the middle. Houston thought they had them with a great tip plan. The Texas State coach adjusted with the under defense. How many times have you seen an under defense lately? And he played under with 3 diggers and picked up almost everything. I thought it was a masterful job by Coach Sean Hewitt at Texas State. But Houston may be looking ahead at Kentucky, and that happens sometimes. So Houston's talented, no question, and they're well coached. I like their coach, but now they've got to perform.
All right, so this is the part of the rankings and the show where there was so much volleyball this past weekend. This is where you fans are going to have to lock in with me because I'm about to jump around, same like Mick just did, and try to give you as much of a recap about these 16 through 25 as possible. All right, so we talked a little bit about Arkansas. They lost both against Wisconsin. They survived Colorado State in 5 sets. Speaking of surviving, you've got Creighton at 16. They survived 2 scares this past weekend, a scare from Ball State, and then a wild set against Northern Illinois. Creighton was up 1-0. Northern Illinois won the second set 36-34, but the Jays held on, and Creighton still lines up for a fun matchup coming up, as you mentioned, with Nebraska. How about Purdue? Purdue had a crazy weekend. They went deep into the Lawrence night against Kansas, a 5-set thriller on Wednesday from 8-8 to 13 all. And then Purdue won the match 15-13, but there was a challenge and it was overturned. And then they won the match again, 16-14, challenge, overturned. And then they won the match again. And finally, the Chacon kill, the freshman from Nebraska, it stood, and it was such a funny, wild, emotional ride for someone who didn't really have that much invested in it. I couldn't imagine Purdue fans and Kansas fans watching that one on Wednesday. The Boilermakers, well, they got the blood boiling again for fans because they took down Marquette in 5 as Eva Hudson had 21 kills. And Mick, Purdue's going to face the winner, which I love this, the winner of Kentucky-Houston on Saturday at home. That's going to be a lot of fun. And you talk about Marquette. Tennessee's going to face Marquette this weekend, but the Golden Eagles, I think that's what they are, didn't have the best of weekends. They obviously were beat by Purdue in that thrilling 5-set match. They also fell a little bit earlier in the week. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, I want to talk about the newcomers, though, Mick. We've got Hawaii and Auburn blanketing Marquette in the 23 and 25 spots. Hawaii's first top 25 ranking since 2019. At 5 a.m. Eastern time on Friday morning, the match finished as Hawaii beat USC. That's 3 a.m. in Mountain Time, 2 a.m. for the fans out in Los Angeles watching. And Hawaii takes care of USC in both matches there. Auburn as well jumps into the poll. They beat Florida State, a team that was receiving votes, and SMU. And when you talk about the entire tournament in Lawrence, Kansas came back to beat Marquette. I'm a little surprised that Marquette is sitting in our top 25, but to be honest, Iowa State at 27, do they necessarily deserve to jump in? Western Kentucky lost to Penn State and then swept by James Madison, so they fall out of the top 25 poll. Woo, how about some non-top 25 notable matches? UCLA and Washington both beat Long Beach State this weekend in fun ones. South Carolina and Miami had a phenomenal weekend. They fought in a 5-set match that South Carolina, the Gamecocks won. Mick, a total deciding factor of 11 points in that 5-setter. Almost every single set decided by 2 points in that SC versus Miami battle. And Miami's going to have a fun one in Wisconsin this weekend. And I think that's everything. Wyoming, undefeated. They're a team you've got to keep an eye on, not receiving any votes, but they went down to Lubbock, ran through the Texas Tech Red Raider Classic. So they sit a team on the outside that you got to give a little bit of respect to here moving into the third week of the season. But I do believe, Mick, that is my rapid fire moment coming in. And I do want to go ahead.
Yeah, let me throw 2 more teams in.
Come at me.
I think Dayton has got another dark horse that's coming along very well and being very well coached. And Texas A&M with Jamie Morrison heading up that team is somebody to really watch. I would agree with Auburn coming on. They, I think, had a 15-0 unbeaten streak going into the end of last season. They started off this year the same way. They played very well in all of their matches. So when they start playing the top of the SEC, want to see what they can do. But I would reiterate, Texas A&M is going to make some noise in the SEC. And Dayton already has played a number of the top teams and played them well and played them close. That team will get better as they get their confidence.
All right, Mick, and we've got to wrap the show up by talking about the newest conference realignment news. The Pac-12, the Pac-4, down to the Pac-2 now. Cal and Stanford headed to the ACC, the All-Coast Conference, as well as SMU. And so now an 18-team ACC conference. Might have said SEC. I mean ACC. They needed 12 votes to make the move to add Cal, Stanford, and SMU. They had 11. And then there was a deliberation. And then NC State flipped their vote to add the 3 new teams. And Mick, I don't know if you heard the news, but the Golden Gate Bridge now sits above the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, that's a strange one. And as far as for football and basketball, there's all kinds of talk, but for volleyball, you put Stanford in now with Louisville, Pittsburgh, Georgia Tech,
Great.
and some of the younger ones coming up. You've got a top 4 conference. If they schedule home and home with their top 9 teams, let's say they do 2 divisions and schedule volleyball where the top 9 teams are playing home and home, you get some pretty good volleyball with that. On the other hand, this is a long drive to go from coast to coast, and
you're right.
Stanford doesn't like to travel when they're in school, and they don't go to school until October 1st or something close to that. And so they can do September and not worry about studying and that sort of thing. But when it comes to October, the ACC may have an advantage here. I like the idea, though, of Oregon State and Washington State absorbing the Mountain West to become the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 or the Pac-8, whichever they choose, and using that status and those entries for their football teams and their basketball teams to get in the tournament. And that also will do them well for volleyball. And I think that would be the way to go.
I keep thinking about it. Maybe if they snag Hawaii, that could be really a boost in football and volleyball as well.
There's some thought that actually that conference could do that, but I'm not sure why Hawaii would want to get out of the Big West. They have all these contracts in men's volleyball, for instance. They get to host the championship every year. It just seems to me that the Big West, am I right on that? The Big West is geared for volleyball, not geared for football. And so Hawaii would like to play football at a high level, but they keep having trouble with just getting a stadium, let alone a team. So, there's some things to work on there. I would rather look at San Diego State to add there. I would even look at Fullerton, not Fullerton, excuse me, Fresno State, Wyoming. We've got those teams. Put them in there, and they would be another Big 12 conference that would start to mature, I think. So that would just be my take on that. And, nobody's going to listen to me anyway on that. So it's okay.
Well, we've got one final season where everything is normal, and then it all goes mad next year. So fans, let's enjoy it. Let's leave the complaining to a minimum. We had phenomenal volleyball through the first 2 weeks, and I'm really excited for another weekend. I think that tournament in Palo Alto stands as the best one. But keep an eye on that Kentucky, Houston, Purdue. When you talk about wild 5-setters, I have a feeling we're going to get some good ones there. Also, Wisconsin on the heels. Wouldn't be surprised if Miami put a little jolt in them this weekend. So keep an eye on that. Mick, last word.
Oregon. This is their chance. They've got the people on the schedule. They've got to do it now. Both left sides have got to bring it. Big block in the middle. Good right side. Good setter. Let's see what they do.
Oregon, Minnesota, Oregon, Ohio State in Palo Alto. That's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know how we're going to watch it, but we're going to try to find a way. As always, stay tuned to our Twitter X account on 6 Rotations to try to keep an eye on everything. And if you have TikTok, go check out AVCA TikTok. They're really making some moves, posting a lot of volleyball highlights, and I love to see that gain momentum on a great platform. Well, that was a fun weekend. Can't wait to do it all again. Happy Labor Day weekend to everyone that just celebrated, and I hope you have a great week. For Mick Haley, I'm Daniel Gilman. This is 6 Rotations.